I sold my house to pay for my father's life-saving heart surgery. 3 months later, I discovered my sister had told everyone she paid for it, and my parents had secretly changed their will to leave her everything. When Mum texted, "We need $15.00 for Dad's medication," I finally had the courage to reply with just 2 words: "Ask Emily." Thank you so much for being here and reading this story. I'd love to know where you're from. Drop the name of your city or hometown in the comments below. Now, let's get into the story. My phone lit up at 3:17 a.m. Another text from Mum, Sarah. "We need $15.00 for your father's new medication. The insurance won't cover it. Please call me ASAP. This is urgent." I stared at those words, my stomach knotting with the familiar mix of panic and obligation. 6 years of these messages. 6 years of emergency calls. 6 years of emptying my savings, maxing out credit cards, and putting my own life on hold. My thumb hovered over the call button, the automatic response I'd always had. But something stopped me this time. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the memory of what I discovered just 3 days earlier. Or maybe, finally, it was self-preservation. I set my phone down and looked around my tiny apartment, all I could afford after selling my house to pay for Dad's surgery. The walls seemed to close in as memories flooded back. The realtor sign in front of my dream home. The bank transfer of $175. To the hospital. My parents' tearful gratitude. And then the betrayal I never saw coming. My phone buzzed again. "Sarah, are you there? Your father needs this medication. Please respond." I picked up the phone, my hands shaking. For the first time in my life, I was about to say no to my parents. For the first time, I was choosing myself. "Ask Emily," I typed, then hit send before I could change my mind. 3 dots appeared immediately. Mum was typing. Then they disappeared, reappeared, disappeared. Finally, a single message. "What do you mean?" I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment, tears streaming down my face. How had it come to this? How had I let myself be used for so long? It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when I believed in family above all else, when I thought my sacrifices were appreciated, when I didn't know that while I was selling my home to save my father's life, my sister Emily was telling everyone she had paid for the surgery, when I didn't know my parents had changed their will to leave her everything. The same parents who called me every time they needed money. The worst part, I might never have found out if I hadn't gone over to organize their medical documents last weekend. The truth had been hidden in plain sight, tucked between insurance forms and hospital bills. And once I saw it, everything changed. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been avoiding my entire life. Tomorrow, I would finally stand up for myself. But tonight, for the first time in years, I would sleep without the weight of everyone else's problems on my shoulders. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of uncovering just how deep my sister's deception went. The first time my parents asked for financial help, I was 23 and fresh out of college. Dad had lost his job, and they needed help with the mortgage payment, just for a month, they said. I sent them my first paycheck without hesitation. It felt good to help the people who had raised me. I didn't know then that this would become my life for the next decade. By 26, I was paying for both their car payments. By 28, I was covering their health insurance premiums. By 30, I was sending them money for groceries, utilities, and Dad's growing list of medications. Each request came with promises that it was just until things get better, or just this one time. Things never got better. The requests never stopped. Emily, my younger sister by 3 years, was never asked to contribute. "She's still finding her way," Mum would say. Emily was always finding her way through failed business ventures, spontaneous trips abroad, and an endless parade of expensive hobbies. Meanwhile, I put my own dreams on hold. I delayed buying a home until I was 32, saving for years while still supporting my parents. When I finally bought my little 3-bedroom house with the garden I'd always wanted, I felt a rare moment of pride, something that was just for me. I had exactly 8 months of peace in that house before Dad's heart attack. "He needs bypass surgery." Mom sobbed over the phone. "The insurance will only cover part of it. We need $175.00. Sarah, we don't know what to do." I looked around at my home, The fresh paint I'd chosen so carefully. The garden I'd just started planting. The kitchen I was saving to renovate. I knew what I had to do before Mom even asked. "I'll sell the house," I said quietly. Mom's relief was palpable. "You've always been our rock, Sarah." The house sold quickly. The market was good. I handed over $175.0 to the hospital and moved into the tiny one-bedroom apartment where I now live. I took on freelance work in addition to my full-time job to rebuild my savings. 60-hour work weeks became my new normal. Dad's surgery went well. I visited him every day in the hospital, rushing over after work, bringing home cooked meals that I prepared in my cramped kitchen. Emily came once, stayed for 20 minutes, and left because the hospital gave her anxiety. When Dad came home, I was the one who helped Mom set up the spare bedroom with a hospital bed. I was the one who coordinated with the home health nurse. I was the one who drove him to follow-up appointments. And through it all, I never complained. This was what family did for each other, I thought. This was love. 6 months after the surgery, I was still working those 60-hour weeks. My savings account was slowly recovering, but I was exhausted all the time. Friends stopped inviting me out because I always declined. Dating was out of the question. Who had the time? Who had the energy? One night, after dropping off groceries at my parents' house, I overheard Mom on the phone. "Emily is such an angel," she was saying. "We wouldn't have made it through without her." I paused in the hallway, confused. The sacrifice she made for her father. Not everyone would sell property to save their parents' life. My blood ran cold. What property had Emily sold? As far as I knew, she was still living in her rented downtown apartment, still taking weekend trips to the coast, still posting pictures of expensive restaurant meals on social media. I should have confronted Mom right then, but a lifetime of avoiding conflict held me back. Instead, I quietly left, telling myself I must have misunderstood. I kept paying their bills. I kept working myself to exhaustion. I kept believing that someday it would all be worth it, that someday my sacrifices would be acknowledged. And then came the day I found the will. The day everything I thought I knew about my family shattered into 1,000 painful pieces. The day I finally understood that I hadn't been helping my family all these years. I had been their ATM. It was a Sunday afternoon when my life changed forever. I'd gone to my parents' house to organize their medical documents, something I'd been doing since Dad's surgery. Their filing system was chaotic at best, and with so many insurance claims and doctor's bills, someone needed to keep track of everything. That someone, as always, was me. Mom and Dad had gone to their neighbor's anniversary party, leaving me alone in the study with stacks of papers spread across the desk. I was 3 hours in, filing receipts and updating their medical expense spreadsheet, when I opened a folder labeled Legal Documents. I expected to find insurance policies or maybe Dad's advance directive. Instead, I found their will. I shouldn't have read it. It wasn't addressed to me, but something, intuition perhaps, made me unfold those pages. We, Robert and Margaret Thompson, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath all our worldly possessions, including our home at 1472 Maple Street, all financial accounts, investments, and personal property, to our daughter, Emily Thompson. I read the paragraph 3 times, certain I'd misunderstood, but there it was in black and white. Everything the house I'd been helping them pay for, the investments I'd advised them on, even the car I'd helped them buy last year, all of it was going to Emily. My name appeared once, in a single sentence, to our daughter Sarah Thompson. We leave our gratitude for her support through the years. Gratitude, that was my inheritance, not the home I'd been making mortgage payments on, not even Mum's grandmother's pearl necklace she'd always promised would be mine someday. Just gratitude. The will was dated 3 months ago, just after Dad's surgery, the surgery I had sold my house to pay for. My hands were shaking as I put the will back in its folder. I told myself there must be an explanation. Maybe this was an old draft. Maybe there was another document I hadn't found yet. I continued organizing, my mind racing, when I came across a small blue envelope. Inside was a handwritten card with a watercolor heart on the front. "Dearest Emily." It read in Mum's handwriting, "Words cannot express our gratitude for your incredible sacrifice. Selling your investment property to pay for your father's surgery was the most selfless act a daughter could do. You have given him the gift of life, and we will never forget it. All our love. Mom and Dad. The card slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor. Emily's investment property. Emily had never owned any property. The only property that had been sold was my house, my home. In a daze, I reached for my phone and opened Facebook. I scrolled through my parents' profiles until I found it. A post from 2 months ago that I'd somehow missed. Feeling blessed beyond measure, Mom had written, "Our amazing daughter Emily made the ultimate sacrifice for her father, selling her property to pay for his life-saving surgery. Some angels walk among us, and we're lucky enough to have one in our family." The post had dozens of comments praising Emily's selflessness. Friends and family calling her incredible and a true example of love. Emily had responded to each comment with humble thanks and heart emojis. My throat tightened as I kept scrolling. There were more posts, dinner celebrations honoring Emily's sacrifice, photos of my parents hugging her with captions about their hero daughter. Not once was I mentioned. Not once did anyone acknowledge that it was my house that had been sold, my savings that had been emptied, my life that had been put on hold. I sat back in the chair, struggling to breathe. This wasn't just about the will anymore. This was about a deliberate rewriting of reality. Emily had taken credit for my sacrifice, and my parents had not only allowed it, they had actively participated in the lie. As I continued searching through the papers, more evidence emerged. A letter from my father's doctor thanking Emily for her generous financial contribution to his care. Photos of Emily at a hospital charity gala being recognized as a major donor the same week. I'd been working overtime to cover Dad's physical therapy bills, but the final blow came when I found a folder hidden at the back of the filing cabinet. Inside were documents showing that Emily had been selling off my parents' assets, family heirlooms, investment pieces, even Dad's prized coin collection, all with signed authorization from my parents. The most recent sale was just 2 weeks ago, an antique desk that had been in our family for generations. The money from these sales wasn't going to medical bills. The bank statements showed transfers to Emily's personal account. While I'd been sacrificing everything to keep my parents afloat, Emily had been systematically stripping away their assets for her own gain. I heard the front door open, my parents returning from their party. I quickly gathered the evidence I'd found and slipped it into my bag. My hands were steady now, my shock replaced by a cold, clear anger I'd never felt before. It was time for a conversation that was long overdue. "Sarah, we didn't expect you to still be here." Mum's voice was bright as she entered the study, Dad following behind her. They both froze when they saw my face. "What's wrong, honey?" Dad asked, concern etching his features the same features. I'd spent $175.0 to keep alive. I held up the folder containing their will. "I found this." The color drained from Mum's face. Dad looked away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the carpet. "You weren't supposed to see that," Mum finally said, clearly. My voice was eerily calm, just like I wasn't supposed to see the card thanking Emily for selling her non-existent property to pay for Dad's surgery, or the Facebook posts celebrating her sacrifice, or the documents showing she's been selling your possessions. "Now, Sarah," Dad began, his tone placating. "You're misunderstanding the situation." "Am I? Because it seems pretty clear to me. I sold my house, my home, to pay for your surgery. I've been supporting you both financially for years, and somehow Emily gets all the credit and all the inheritance." Mom sank into the armchair by the window. "Emily needed the recognition," she said softly. "She's always struggled with feeling less than you." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "Less than me. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I work 60 hours a week. I haven't been on a vacation in 5 years. Meanwhile, Emily posts from a different beach every month." "That's not what we mean," Dad said, finding his voice. "You've always been the strong one. Sarah, the capable one. Emily needs more support." "Support?" I pulled out the documents showing the sales of their possessions. "Is that what you call this? She's been selling everything you own." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "We gave her permission. She's helping us downsize." "Into what?" "Nothing." I spread the bank statements across the desk. "The money isn't going toward your expenses. It's going directly to her account. She manages our finances now," Dad said weakly. "Since when?" "Since I paid for your surgery. Since I became just the ATM. and Emily became the beloved daughter. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded me. And I suddenly realized they'd been excluding me for years. We didn't want to burden you more than we already had. Mom finally said, burden me. The words felt like acid in my mouth. You weren't burdening me. You were using me. And now you've written me out of your will completely. You don't need an inheritance, Dad said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. You're so good with money. Emily will need that security. I stared at them, these people I'd sacrificed everything for, trying to recognize the parents I thought I knew. Do you hear yourselves? Do you even see what you're doing? What we're doing is looking out for both our daughters, Mum said, her voice hardening. Emily has always needed more help. You've always been independent. Independent because I had to be. Because every time I turned around, you were asking for more money, more help, more sacrifices, while Emily got to live her life however she wanted. That's not fair. Sarah, Dad said. No, what's not fair is that I sold my house for you, and you let Emily take credit for it. What's not fair is that I've spent my adult life supporting you both, and my reward is gratitude, while Emily gets everything else. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text from earlier that night. $15.00 for medication. That's what you asked for tonight. How much have I given you over the years? $200.00.300 so. And how much has Emily contributed? They were silent. That's what I thought. I stood up, gathering the evidence I'd collected. I'm done. No more money. No more support. No more being the family ATM. You can't mean that, Mom whispered, tears forming in her eyes. We're your parents, and I'm your daughter, the one you've taken for granted for too long. Dad reached for me. Sarah, please, we love you. I stepped back from his touch. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let Emily take credit for my sacrifice. You wouldn't have written me out of your will. You wouldn't have hidden all of this from me. What do you want us to do? Mom asked, her voice small. I want you to ask Emily for the $15.00 you need. I want you to see what happens when you actually expect her to contribute. And I want you both to think about why you've treated your daughters so differently all these years. I walked to the door, then turned back. I've spent my life trying to be the daughter you needed. Maybe it's time you try to be the parents I deserve. The drive home was a blur. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts from Mom, then Dad, then Emily herself, who'd apparently been immediately called and told everything. I ignored them all. Back in my tiny apartment, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt something unexpected, relief. The weight of obligation I'd carried for so long was lifting. The fog of manipulation was clearing. I could see my family for what they truly were, not what I desperately wanted them to be. My phone buzzed again. A text from Emily. You had no right to upset Mom and Dad like this, after everything they've done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity. After everything they'd done for me, I typed back a simple response. I know the truth now. All of it. Then I blocked her number. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. I couldn't change the past, the money spent, the house sold, the years wasted, but I could control what happened next. And what happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. 3 months passed. Autumn turned to winter, and the city was decorated with twinkling lights and holiday displays. I hadn't spoken to my family since the night of the confrontation. Oh, they tried to contact me. The first week brought daily voicemails from Mom, alternating between tearful pleas and guilt-laden accusations. Dad sent emails with subject lines like, "We need to talk," and "Please don't do this." Emily bombarded my work email, the only channel I hadn't blocked, with messages ranging from angry tirades to sudden apologies that never quite acknowledged what she was apologizing for. I read them all. I responded to none. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I opened a new savings account, one that was just for me, not for family emergencies. I started therapy, unpacking years of manipulation and guilt with a compassionate professional who helped me see patterns I'd been blind to. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my years of 60-hour work weeks and constant family obligations. And I began looking at houses again, not the dream home I'd lost. I wasn't ready for that kind of investment yet, but something modest that would be mine alone. It was during an open house in a quiet neighborhood across town that my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Sarah Thompson?" a formal voice asked. "Yes, it is. This is Mercy General Hospital. Your father has been admitted with chest pains. He's asking for you." My heart stuttered. Despite everything, he was still my father. Is it serious? The doctors are running tests. He's stable for now. I thanked the nurse and ended the call, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to rush to the hospital immediately. The other part, the part that had been healing these past months, whispered caution. I called the hospital back and asked to speak directly to his doctor. After confirming my identity, the doctor told me that Dad was indeed stable. His chest pains were concerning but not immediately life-threatening. They were keeping him overnight for observation and tests. "Has anyone else from the family been notified?" I asked. "Yes, his wife is with him now. We also called another daughter, Emily, I believe." I thanked him and hung up. Then I made a decision. I would go to the hospital, but I would go on my terms. When I arrived, I asked the nurse to check if my father was alone before I entered. She returned, saying he was by himself. Mom had gone to the cafeteria, and Emily hadn't arrived yet. Dad looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed with monitors attached to his chest. His eyes widened when I walked in. "Sarah," he whispered. "You came." "I came," I said, taking the chair beside his bed, but not reaching for his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're here." His eyes filled with tears. "I've missed you so much." I nodded, acknowledging his words without returning the sentiment. "What happened?" "Chest pains while I was mowing the lawn." "Probably nothing. But with my history." He trailed off, then looked at me hopefully. "The doctor says I should be fine, just need to take it easy for a while." I recognized the opening, the subtle invitation for me to offer help, to fall back into my old role. 3 months ago, I would have immediately volunteered to take over the yard work, to drive him to follow-up appointments, to manage his care. Not today. "I'm glad you're getting good care," I said, simply. An awkward silence fell between us. Dad fidgeted with his hospital bracelet. "Sarah, about what happened, Dad. I didn't come here to rehash the past. I came because you're in the hospital, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. But we need to talk about it. Your mother and we've been thinking a lot about what you said." I raised an eyebrow. "Have you?" "Yes. And you were right. We took advantage of you. We let Emily take credit for things she didn't do. His voice broke. "We weren't fair to you." It was the first time either of my parents had admitted wrongdoing, without qualifications or excuses. I felt a small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "We've made changes," he continued. "We revised our will. We told Emily she needs to stand on her own feet. She didn't take it well, but," he shrugged, "it was time." I nodded, processing his words. "I appreciate that. But Dad, this isn't just about the will or the money. It's about years of being treated like my only value was what I could provide." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I don't expect you to forgive us right away, or maybe ever. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you." Before I could respond, the door opened. Mum stood there, a coffee cup in her hand, frozen in surprise. "Sarah," she breathed. "Hi, Mum." She rushed forward as if to hug me, then stopped herself, sensing my reserve. "You're here." "I am." She glanced at Dad, who gave her a small nod. "We've been trying to reach you," she said. "I know. I've seen the messages. We've made changes," she echoed Dad's words. "We've been seeing a family therapist. We're learning about toxic family dynamics." She said the phrase carefully, as if it were in a foreign language she was still learning. "About how we enabled Emily and exploited you." I looked between them, these two people who had shaped my entire life, for better and worse. They seemed smaller somehow, more fragile, but also more honest than I'd seen them in years. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said, finally. "I am too." Mum looked surprised. "You are?" "Yes. I'm learning about boundaries, about not setting myself on fire to keep others warm." Dad nodded slowly. "That's good, Sarah. That's really good." The door opened again, and there was Emily, designer handbag on her arm, looking annoyed. She stopped short when she saw me. "What is she doing here?" she demanded. "Emily," Mum said sharply, with a firmness I'd rarely heard her use with my sister. Sarah has every right to be here. More right than any of us, considering everything she's done for this family. Emily's mouth fell open. She looked from Mom to Dad, to me, clearly thrown by this united front. But she abandoned us. Emily protested. She cut us off when we needed her most. No, Dad said quietly. She set boundaries when we crossed lines we never should have crossed. There's a difference. Emily's face flushed. So what? Now she's the golden child, after I've been taking care of you both for months. I almost laughed. Even now, she was clinging to the false narrative. Emily, I said, speaking directly to my sister for the first time in months. No one is the golden child. That's not what this is about. This is about honesty and accountability. Emily scoffed. Honesty. You want to talk about honesty? You've turned Mom and Dad against me with your lies. What lies? Exactly, I asked calmly. That I sold my house to pay for Dad's surgery while you took credit for it. That I've been supporting them financially for years while you've been selling off their possessions. Those kinds of lies. Emily's face flushed deeper. She turned to our parents. Are you just going to let her talk to me like this? Mom straightened her shoulders. Emily, we've discussed this in therapy. Sarah isn't saying anything untrue. Therapy. Emily spat the word. 3 sessions with some quack who believes everything Sarah says. And suddenly I'm the villain. No one is calling you a villain, Dad said wearily. But we've been enabling behaviors that weren't healthy for any of us. Emily's eyes filled with tears. The quick, strategic tears. I'd seen her deploy countless times. After everything I've done for this family. I can't believe this. I watched her performance with new clarity. How many times had I seen this exact scene play out? Emily feeling attacked. Emily crying. Everyone rushing to comfort Emily. The familiar script was unfolding, but something was different this time. No one was rushing to comfort her. Mom and Dad exchanged glances but remained silent. The moment stretched, uncomfortable and new. Emily's expression shifted from hurt to confusion to anger. Fine. If that's how it's going to be. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Don't call me when you need something. I'm done being your personal ATM. The irony of her words, my words, thrown back as if they were her own experience, was almost too much. The door slammed behind her. A heavy silence fell over the room. I'm sorry you had to see that, Mom finally said. I shrugged. It's nothing I haven't seen before. No, but our response to it is different now, Dad said. We're trying. Sarah, we really are. I nodded, acknowledging their effort without making promises. I should go. I'm glad you're okay. Dad, will we hear from you again? Mum asked hesitantly. I paused at the door. Yes, but things can't go back to how they were. We don't want them to, Dad said. The old way wasn't working for anyone. I gave them a small smile, the first genuine one I'd offered them in months. I'll call next week. We can talk more then. As I walked through the hospital corridors, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, that would take much more time, but perhaps on the path toward healing. My parents were making an effort. They were acknowledging the past. It was more than I had expected. Outside, the winter air was crisp and clean. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs completely. My phone buzzed with a text from my realtor about the house I'd seen earlier. Seller is considering your offer. Should hear by tomorrow. I smiled and texted back my thanks. Then noticed another message from Emily. Sent just minutes ago. This isn't over. They'll see through you eventually. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Emily's threats didn't hold the power they once did. I understood now that her behavior came from her own insecurities, her own need to be the center of attention, to be taken care of. In some ways, I pitied her, but I also knew that I couldn't fix her, just as I couldn't fix my parents. The only person I could truly heal was myself. 6 months later, I sat on the small deck of my new home, not the dream house I'd once owned, but a cozy place that was all mine. The spring flowers I'd planted were beginning to bloom, splashes of color against the fresh mulch. My relationship with my parents was cautiously rebuilding. We met for lunch every other Sunday, neutral territory. Limited time, clear boundaries. They were still seeing their therapist. I was still seeing mine. We were all learning a new way to be family. Emily and I remained estranged. She'd made a few attempts at reconciliation, but they always came with conditions, with subtle manipulations, with an undercurrent of competition I no longer had the energy for. Perhaps someday that would change. Perhaps not. My phone rang a client with a question about their financial plan. As a newly certified financial advisor, I'd started building a practice, helping people navigate their own money journeys. Many of my clients were women emerging from financially abusive relationships, looking to reclaim their independence. I understood them in ways I couldn't have before my own experience. Yes, absolutely, I told my client. Setting boundaries around money is one of the hardest but most important things you can do, and you have every right to do it. As I spoke the words, I felt their truth in my bones. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of guilt, of wondering if I was doing the right thing. But sitting here now, in a home I'd earned through my own hard work, with healthy boundaries protecting my peace, I knew I'd made the right choice. The family ATM was closed, and Sarah, the real Sarah, not the endless giver, not the perpetual caretaker, but the woman with dreams and needs of her own, was finally open for business.